Test, test, test. Right, can we get everybody with their cups of tea back in here, please? I'm going to do all the crap. I'll just give it to you too.
All right, fair enough. I really don't know how this is. There's only 37 minutes.
I'll just talk slowly.
I do need to know, we've still got half a page.
Okay, welcome back everybody who's in the room, and welcome to those in Zoomsville out there who are now watching us because the streaming's up and running. Welcome back to CPS. First of all, I hope all our visitors got inundated with people saying hello and got lots of cups of tea and felt like they can't possibly not come back or fill out one of those forms, so it's a good start. Before the programs, this evening's program, I'm going to run through all the notices, and we have got one or two. So I'm going to start by asking Diane to tell us all about the studio visit that happened last night.
I won't tell everyone about it, but it was a great night, and I just wanted to thank the members that came along. Initially I had about 15 people interested, but by the time we chose the dates and the times, there was I think it was 9 of us there last night. Because of the low numbers, he opened it up to the public, so there was another 6. So all in all, we had quite a nice select group last night, and we had a 3 hours of really good instruction and interaction, and we got to play with shooting the models as well. We had a professional model who was absolutely gorgeous and very easy to work with. Learned a lot, and I think everyone that came agree that we had a good time and it was worth doing. Also, Denise Fuller managed to run away with a spot prize that we didn't even know was going to happen. So she got 2 hours of free studio time. So we shall expect to see some interesting work, Denise. I'm hoping to buddy up with her and lean on her and see if I can go as well, because I think it would be fun to have a play. I don't know. I'll keep my eyes peeled for anything else that comes along that I think it might interest the club as a group. So anyway, thank you all for those that came.
Thanks, Dwight. And we've got some more opportunities and things for portrait-orientated photographers not far away, so just watch this space. Janine wants to talk about the fungi trip.
Thank you. So the fungi forage trip to Greymouth is next weekend. We've had really good numbers for that, but we've still got one more female bed available in the shared CPS accommodation. So if you're interested in that, it'd be great to have you join the group. Just sign up on the registration form that was emailed out earlier, or get in touch with me if you can't find it. If a bigger group than one person wants to come along, or if there's any males that want to come along, there's lots of accommodation available in the camping ground, so still register with us and just contact the camp to organise your own accommodation. We're looking forward to going there and hoping for good weather.
I thought you were hoping for bad weather to make it better photography. And then we're going to talk about next week. So the first thing that's happening next week is a travel photography, and Nelson's going to tell us about a little bit of a preemptive on that.
I'll just tell you that it's not going to be a travelogue. I'm sure people can hear me, can they?
Not on these.
Okay, it is not going to be a travelogue. It's a tutorial hour, and so I'm going to take some travel photographs of mine, most of them from Europe, and talk about how they were done and tips and techniques that you can use both in your travel and also in your photography here closer to home.
Cool. So, travel photography. Come along next week. The 7 o'clock session is Nelson talking about travel photography, and that's followed up at 8 o'clock by natural history projected image. The week after, the 24th, at the 7 p.m. session, and this hasn't been advertised yet, but it's you heard this first. Alan Moore's going to give us a talk on digital asset management. So how not to lose your pictures. If you don't know what an XMP file is, then come along. Alan will enlighten us all, and that will be followed by PI number 4. Then I just want to talk briefly about some competitions that are closing shortly. The first one Dennis has already talked about is the Laurie Thomas Salon, so don't forget to enter that. But closing on the 17th of May is PI number 5, which is photojournalism, and print number 3 closes on the 31st of May. The other thing I want to briefly talk about is a reminder about the SET Challenge, and that hand-in for the SET Challenge is the middle of June, the 14th of June. Remember, we'll put it back up again on Facebook and just wave the flag a bit so people have kind of forgotten about it. It's a 4-image set, which is a diverse range of images, one with people, one with place, one about people, one about place, one about form, and one about light. So that's a slightly different take of the just small sets that we did last year reasonably successfully. And then the other part of that is anything goes that you've made, so a physical thing. If you've made a blurb book, or if you've made a calendar, or if you've made anything, enter it in that part of the SET Challenge. And that closes, as I say, on the 14th of June. So now I'm going to hand back to Di to introduce print number, whatever we're up to, 2.
Okay, tonight our judge is James Gibson, one of our very own members, So I hope you will give him a warm welcome. As you know, I was going to say, this is the blurb he's given me. This is a long-standing member of CPS. He was awarded associateship of the PSNZ, excuse me, with a set of monochrome landscape images in 2016. He won the Laurie Thomas Salon in 2017 and the Champion Monochrome Print at the Dunedin Festival in 2019. He was awarded EFIAP Bronze in 2021 and won the Champion Landscape Print at PSNZ Sony, excuse me, this always happens to me, at the Sony National Exhibition in 2021. James is an accredited judge with the PSNZ on the Honours Board of the Nature Photographic Society and on the selection panel for the New Zealand camera. Excuse me. James has spent time ice climbing and mountaineering in the UK, Europe and Canada, bike riding across New Zealand, Brazil, Indonesia and Tahiti. Since, sorry, excuse me. Since 2020, he has been into paragliding, which has allowed him to get back into the mountains without all that painful hiking back down again. He has also invented a juggling pattern. Have you? Really? Wow. Oh, fascinating. Maybe you could show us at Christmas a little act on stage. Photographically, James particularly enjoys landscapes, and it fits with his love of outdoors and gives him an excuse to visit remote places. Please welcome James Gibson.
No worries. Good evening, folks. Sure thing. Wow, it's been a long time since I've been up on this stage. I hope you're all well. It's been a great pleasure to get to judge, critique this second print competition. And I have to say, the standard, especially of the presentation at CPS, is absolutely fantastic. The prints are beautifully matted and mounted, and yeah, really quite stunning. I've only judged the prints. I haven't actually seen the digitals at all. So all my comments are around the physical print that was presented. So hopefully, and my laptop's just turned itself off. So if there's any questions and queries with what I've got to say, then come and talk to me afterwards, and go and have a look at the prints. I highly encourage you to go and look at the prints up close later. There's some stunning detail in the images there. The other thing I really wanted to say, because of the way that CPS's final night and acceptance percentages go, I think it's quite important that we try and consider the critiques and the score slightly independently. So I've tried to critique the images as fairly and as an individual, but the score is based on what's been presented in this competition, rather than how that image might stand up in any other competition. So there's some images that I'm comfortable would be honours in other clubs, but in CPS in this particular competition may not have done quite so well. It's because the standard is so exceptionally high here. So congratulations to you for having that high standard. Alrighty, let's get started. Pheo feeding. Nice framing, showing me this pair of Pheo with lovely feather detail and space around the ducks and nice composition. But for me, there's no heads. The best bit about these guys is underwater, and it makes it difficult for me to interact with them in a great deal of detail. There's lovely feather detail, lovely water, and great shutter speed, depth of field. Technical stuff is fantastic. The coloring is lovely. And I hope that you kept shooting, because I'm sure they came up to breathe at some point. But in this competition, not accepted. Score of 1. Sentries, gulls and young seals in Kaikoura. I love the hierarchy here. The gulls above the seals, and they've all got their own little tier on the rock. The The jagged coastline and the textures in the rocks are really interesting, with all the locals settled in and allegedly comfortable, though I'm not sure I'd be that comfy on the rock. The diffuse, fairly flat light has made it quite hard to get depth into the image, and the seals in particular are quite dark in the print, which makes it much harder for me to engage with them in a lot of detail. And there's quite a lot of banding on the print. You'll have to go and have a look at the physical print to see that, I think. So that shows up quite obviously with the soft tones in the image. I like the leading lines. I like the sort of flow of the print up from that bottom left corner. Maybe a little more space around the top of the gulls would be nice to give that sense of scale. Clearview Debbie. I think my Google searches as a result of this competition are going to be slightly skewed towards different types of dahlia. So the framing and the tonal matching of that background are really nice, work together very pleasantly to highlight that main hero in the image. And I love the symmetry and the flow of the petals around the frame. There's a lovely rhythm, especially in those outer petals that kind of draw you into the middle. There's a few little dark marks on the inner petals as you get closer to that core, which are a little bit distracting. And I like the simple background, but I think what's been done is that the dahlia has been clear cut and then a painterly style background put in. And on the print, there's quite a lot of masking issues around the outside edge of the leaves. So just pay a little bit of TLC to those fine touches around the edge. Littleton Harbour. Lovely choice of paper and presentation on this. It's a glossy paper which works really well to complement that reflective water in the background, and the image is very sharp throughout, which is really good. It's a lovely day. We've got lovely little cumulus clouds popping up over Mount Herbert in the background there, and all these masts and all the boats. But because of that deep depth of field and the busyness in the image, it makes it quite hard for my eye to settle in a certain place. And I think that possibly either honing in on one area or using a shallower depth of field to try and isolate a subject might help me understand where I'm supposed to be looking. There's some interesting little characters in the image, but it all gets kind of lost in the masts. So well done for keeping all the masts nicely in the frame and nicely vertical. Trying to find a simpler composition would help get across a stronger message for me. Sweet As Brew. It's not called Sweet As Bro, it's just called Sweet As, sorry. Lovely bright colours and lovely flow from the flower all the way up along the back of the monarch's wing and then back around, keeping me nicely in the frame. On the print, it's quite a tight crop. I think there's possibly a little more space on the digital that we're seeing there. So it feels quite a cramped, close image. And it's not quite as sharp as I was expecting, I would expect on the print. I think possibly because it's high ISO or there's been quite a lot of noise reduction or something's in there that's reduced the sharpness of the image. I do like the soft background. It's really nice and non-distracting and gives me context. Autumn Leaf. Lovely mottled colours and textures in this, and some really interesting shapes about how the leaves are kind of interacting and the shadows that they're casting on each other against a nice simple background. There's good lead-in context with the twig in the top left corner there that's leading me down to the leaves. And I did really enjoy it. Unfortunately, in the print, there's quite a lot of motion blur, which I think has come from the camera, maybe not. But the print's not quite sharp, which is casting it down a little in this competition, so sorry about that. It's an interesting point. As you get a longer focal length and higher res cameras, the amount of camera shake and movement comes out a lot more, so bigger lenses need remarkably faster shutter speeds to get a nice sharp image. Jet racing, 189898845. Nice composition. The boat and the rider isolated nicely with the spray in the background and a simple black or dark tree background, no distracting highlights in the background. I like the composition. In this instance, there's a lot of very dark areas and very bright areas in the print that might be salvageable in the original image, but on the print, there's a lot of dark. The bottom of the boat has blocked out completely, and a lot of the spray has lost detail. I do like the depth of field, the shutter speed, the composition of the whole image is really nice, and hopefully they'll have come around a few more times. Possibly there's even the detail in that original file, but on this print, it's causing a bit of a distraction. We're now up to score 2. Exposed. The small sand island gradually disappearing under that incoming tide, probably incoming tide. I like that arching kidney shape of the island, creating a bit of a frame for the tree. The area that caught my eye really and has drawn me in is the high contrast of that tree and the foreground rock, which in this instance is kind of backlit. So where I'm hoping to see more detail and more interest that's catching my eye, the sun's kind of on the wrong side of the tree. And I know, this is a great thing for judges to say, oh, just step a bit to the left or come back at a different time of day. But unfortunately, from a competition perspective, that's where my eye goes, and that's where I'm hoping to see a little more detail rather than that silhouetted against the blue sky. So great. In my opinion, this is a lovely record shot of the day, but popping back a few hours later when the sun was on the other side might have made a more engaging composition. Birds on a wire. Lovely clean background and really nice detail in the birds. The really long letterbox format, that panoramic format that's been presented has created an image it's very difficult to hone in on the really interesting parts. There's a lot of really nice detail in the birds and in the little droplets, especially at the bottom or the far left corner where the rope touches the water. There's some really interesting ripples and nice fine detail in there, but it's such a small part of the image. For me, I feel that coming in on that little group of 4 would make a stronger, more powerful, more engaging image to view. It would hold me in the frame. As is, I tend to follow that rope straight along, and I go past the headless seagull on the right, the guy who's ignoring me and facing away, and then I kind of keep going into the empty space. So for me, I feel that maybe reframing that to concentrate on the 4 birds and their reflection would make a tighter, more interesting composition. Going home. The cormorant making his way home. He's the only part in this image that's sharp, and as such, he carries a lot of visual weight. And I really like the challenging composition, the way that this image has been put together, with the cormorant actually flying out of the corner of the frame, balanced with the darker grounding foreground. It's got a texture applied across the top of the image, and the ground, sorry, getting lost here. The ground is really soft and quite blurry. And what I found myself doing was I would go to the cormorant, and then I would go down to this, the foreground, the base of the image, and I was trying to find some detail in there, some interest to hold me in the frame, and I couldn't. It's so blurry that it became more of a distraction without context to give me a bit more information. There's also a little bit of haloing around the shag, I think, where the texture's been removed from him. So maybe that could be a little bit tweaked. And because he's the sharp part, you tend to really look at that in detail. I did really like that unorthodox composition, and possibly a little less blur, a little more detail in that foreground would help hold my eye a little longer. Solitude. It's a very clean, minimalist composition with this silhouetted island and the foreground lakeshore with these little tiny dots of clouds around the image. I did find it quite tranquil and calming. However, for me, there's a nice little cloud just above that the main dark island in the center of the frame, which on the print is slightly off to the right. And then there's a big empty space, and then these little patches of cloud right up at the top of the frame, and I found my eye bounced from the top to the bottom. So rather than getting a sense of solitude or of calm, I found that sort of dynamic, that space between the elements added a bit of tension to the frame. The prints also slightly soft. The trees and the detail on the island are not quite as sharp as I would like, given the visual weight and how much your eye goes to those. Aerial delivery. This is a striking capture of this bird with its catch, and it's great to see the focus on that poor little lizard gecko guy with the wings almost frozen. It's really, remarkable shot to see. I would like a little more light on the bird. You could play a little bit in post-processing to make him stand out a little against the very sharp foreground. I think it's a rock, could be a bit of wood on the left-hand side. And on the print, and it's actually there on the digital as well, there's some strange banding on the upper wingtip feathers. You can see it fairly clearly through here. And I'm not quite sure what's caused that, but it's quite a dominant part of the image once you see it. The background's nice and simple. It's a really unique image, and if it weren't for the standard of the other images, this one was right on the cusp of getting into the acceptance level for me. Penny. Oh, sorry, brief note on the previous image, aerial delivery. Arial is a type of font, A-R-I-A-L. When I judge these, I'm looking at the prints. So when I fill the comments in, I read the titles and then get a bit, if the title distracts, it's kind of confusing. That minor point. Penny. I like the creative angle that this portrait's been made from. I can't help imagining that the smile on the subject's face there is to do with the photographer's antics, crawling around on the floor and entertaining the subject quite a lot. I'm sure it was a lot of fun. Getting down low and lowering the horizon has done really well to isolate the subject against that simple blue background, and her red jacket works well to bring the subject to the fore. I think it's a lovely candid portrait. The that's captured a nice moment between the photographer and Penny, but as an external viewer, it doesn't have a whole lot of emotional context for me outside of that. So well done for capturing it, but I'm not sure it makes it as a competition image for me. Evelyn. The hard sort of find edges style processing of that gritty processing is really kind of interesting. It's an intriguing choice. Pardon me. Very different to what we normally see, and I quite like that artistic creativity. The petals feel almost like an array of pipes. They're so kind of closed up and circular, which makes for a really interesting composition, and it focuses us in on that little patch of purple right in the center. I found that in the print, the busyness of all the dots on the petals started to become a bit of a distraction from that central subject. They kind of dragged my eye away, which sort of overwhelmed the feeling of softness and subtlety in the color tone. I like the composition, and I thought maybe sort of dialing back that processing a little and going for a compromise where we've got the edges of the petals highlighted would make a really nice image. Where have all the flowers gone? This was a lovely high-key still life of these twigs and their empty seed pods, until you realize it's actually only one twig that's been played with and mirrored and moved and creatively shifted around. And I really enjoyed that. And the thing that finally gave it away for me was where the two twigs cross over, they're both on top of each other. It's kind of fascinating. It was really fun to play with that and see how it all works. And hey, maybe that was the intent. It's kind of cool. The shallow depth of fields left just the central cluster of pods sharp, and I can study those in quite a lot of detail and enjoy the little bits of cobwebs and intricate little features on those pods. And I like the fade out towards the top where they drift out of focus onto the bright background. It works really nicely for me. The only reason this didn't make it into the acceptances or higher is on the print there is a large masking error, which you can actually see on the digital as well. It's just here. I thought it was a crease in the print, but it's not. It's actually in the image there. West Coast Walkway. This woodland scene definitely reminds me of chips around and a rainforest and on the west coast. The ferns and the mosses make a really nice lead-in to what for me is the central element or the main element in the frame, which is that leftward-leaning trunk. And I follow that trunk up and unfortunately into the bright area and out of the image via there's a couple of little lens flares in there as well, which are a little bit distracting for me. I like the fact that the path is in there and it's kind of a subtle part of it, but the play of the bright leaves, especially the reflections on the leaves, pulls my eye over to the left-hand side of that frame. I wonder if possibly a polarizer might have helped reduce some of the reflections on the leaves a little bit and balance out the brightness there. It's unfortunate. I think photographing in forests is probably the hardest landscape topic. It's certainly the most difficult one that I find, and this is an excellent effort at it to kind of create that simpler composition. But the brightness and the small technical issues have dropped it down in this competition. And now we're into acceptances. Dance. For me, this is a study of curves and colors and tones with those three circles absolutely tack sharp in the print. with that nice, graceful curve through the center. I like the simplicity, and I was wondering about maybe removing those last 3 or 4 little droplets around the edge, just to simplify it even more. It's a very pleasant image. There's some banding through the color tones, which is, you can see on the projector there as well, with those soft tones that detracts a little from that sort of soft color palette. But otherwise, compositionally, very, very pleasant image. I was waiting for this one. I got the box and I went, there's going to be one in here that's covered in wax, I'm sure of it. And here it is, blurry and covered in wax. Fantastic. Thank you, Ian, for making my day. I love the soft yellows and the blues of the snow and ice. You have to go and look at the print on this one. The digital is does not represent the full scope of the image. I really like the combination of tack sharp and blurry. We've got this sort of weird juxtaposition of the motion and the movement of the dog train, and then in the background the trees have been blurred vertically, but there's little sharp elements in there, and there's some interesting kind of yellow tones, sort of, which helps set the mood and create this contrast, which I really liked. The way that the wax has been put on has kind of been done to, in my opinion, I just assume that I mean in my opinion whenever I forget to say it, sorry, to sort of amplify that blur so that the dog sled team is more blurry, and then all through this area down here, sorry, standing in front of the screen, the wax has been kind of scarified and gouged out, and it feels like cracked ice, and it's that sort of adds to that sense of cold and foreboding, bleak environment. So really, crusty neve I've written down here. It was very pleasant. I found the image is quite a horizontal banded composition. So we've got the dog sled team running through the middle of the frame, and then the blank line of trees forming our background element. And then in the foreground, there's this leading section. And I wonder whether, if there was something that would lead me through the bands, that might help hold my eye in the image more, or alternatively, maybe going exactly the opposite and making it all about those bands and removing that foreground. I'm not sure to sort of amplify that feeling of length and speed and motion. That was the only real tension for me, but the processing is beautiful as expected. Lots of fun image. Definitely go and have a look at that one. Starry Night, Lake Alexandrina. The Milky Way reflecting in a perfect mirror reflection in the lake. Lovely, lovely detail in that foreground tussock. And I really like the simple semi-symmetrical or like offset symmetrical composition. It works really well for me. I've kind of always been into symmetry. I found that this is a lot less obvious in the digital, but I found the foreground grass blended into the darker lakeshore quite a lot. In the print, it's sort of you lose a lot of that nice detail once you get into the body of the tussock, and I would have liked a little bit more light in there to help differentiate it from the lakeshore. On the screen there, it stands out a lot better. I particularly liked the tiny little thin slither of water separating the top of the tussock from the Milky Way and the mountains in the background. It's almost like the tussock's just kind of trying to reach out to touch the stars. So that was a lovely touch there. Kuching Market. The tones of this scene and all those dried foods actually almost make me able to taste and smell the product in this market and feel the hustle and bustle of this sort of spice market concept. I like the selective focus that's really letting me get in on study the gills on the mushrooms. There are some really nice, interesting textures and details in there, and I'm not too distracted by everything around it. I'm torn between the idea of the sort of the more traditional kind of brass bowls or something than plastic bags, but I guess, photography and hygiene has to meet somewhere. So that was an unfortunate modern touch on this. My main issue that I thought might help with my interpretation as an external viewer was this is quite a static image, and for me the spice markets and these food markets are all about the hustle and bustle and movement and motion, and I wonder if there's some options there that could have been explored around adding in people or parts of people and getting that sense of busyness and market day. Fisherman's Hut, Poolburn Dam. Got some great context in the golden tussock colours and the gritty textures in the rocks around the hut there. Obviously, as a judge, I'm allowed to say, oh, wouldn't it be nice if they painted it red? But actually, I quite like the green. It blends in nicely. It feels like the right environment for this place to be. The side lightings help create depth, and I quite like the inclusion of the foreground grounding element with the Spaniards and the grasses there that lead me over the lake towards the hut, and then the sense of expanse and isolation in the background. Very lovely image. For me, something more of the photographer in there would take this from a nice, clean landscape capture to something that had more emotion in it. I have no idea what to suggest on that, but that was, it made a lovely image of that scene. Looking down. Very engaging, tight focus and interesting angle on this portrait of this lady. The tight focus on the eyes make it very engaging and pull me straight into her. The period dress and the scene there give me some kind of context and start to tell me some story. And she's looking down on this sea of clouds, so I'm wondering whether it's there's some story of loss, heaven and earth, death, and those left behind. I'm not sure. There are all sorts of interesting story options in there. I like the composition. I did get a sense that it's more me looking down on her rather than her looking down. It feels like a high camera angle. And there's a bit of a cloning issue just below her right eye, which is an unfortunate distraction when you spot it. But it's a nice concept, well crafted, and I found it very enjoyable. Shy Gannet. There is so much detail in this print. It's that intense blue, which is not quite coming out so much in the digital there, and the patterns in the bird's iris are just fascinating. Go and have a close look at this one. This is great. For me, the interesting parts of this image are all on that left-hand side. And whilst the eye runs sort of it's been placed on the thirds in a strong compositional place, but the right-hand side, this sort of texture in the feathers here isn't actually contributing to the story. I'm focusing on the gannet's eye and the colours in the head. And I wonder if perhaps reframing it, coming in a little bit tighter, maybe a square crop around the eye would make a stronger image without that context on the right there. Lovely depth of field, great exposure, really clean, simple background, very nice. Oh, now this is interesting. Reflection of a crocus-filled light bulb. So I'm going to have to go and get the print. Scott, sorry, excuse me for just a minute. I hope this is all right. So I fished all these prints out of the box, and when I open the box up, I don't look at the back, so I'm just looking at the print and kind of commenting on what I see. So I picked this print up like this, and I was kind of going, "Oh, that's it. Can you see that? Hopefully." And I picked it up and went, "Oh, that's quite interesting. It's a light bulb. Huh? It's not a light bulb. And what's inside it? And there's two of them." And it started asking me all these interesting questions about why is this thing in this light bulb, and how did it get there? And then I noticed that there's a little flat patch on the top of the bulb, or maybe that's the bottom, and it's supposed to be the other way up, or maybe it should be that way up. And then I read the title, and it said reflection, and I went, oh, it's a reflection. And I found that, it's kind of a comment on titles, I guess, more than anything else. I found that the abstract concept was really interesting. And once I understood what it was and why it was, it sort of, my brain kind of switched on and went, oh, that's how it works. And I kind of almost wanted it to be more abstract and less understandable. And I started asking myself, well, why is it like this? And the answer I kind of came up with was, well, actually, it just is. It's a nice still life, and I shouldn't worry about the story so much. And I did quite enjoy it. I find that the double reflection a little bit distracting. Once you spot it, or once you get into it, around where the bulb, especially the screw thread, is reflecting on the glass and the mirror on the back of the glass. But it's quite a minor point. Very enjoyable, but try it in different orientations. Oh, thank you. How are we doing for time? 9 o'clock. Is everyone coping okay? You're still awake? Just about? Excellent. Good, good. Fond memories of the Annapurna track. Beautifully presented. Lovely, simple, clean matte. Nicely crafted portrait of this family group that gave me lots of context for interesting information about their lives. The mismatched socks on the lady in the front and their dress, and the context of the background being kind of interesting, nice color palettes, not distracting from their faces and their expressions, which was really, really nice. A little bit of fill light might have been nice to kind of get a bit of catch light into the eyes, but it's a really enjoyable image of their life and how they live. Minor point on titling. Again, fond memories of the Annapurna track. For me, I can't see Annapurna or the track, so I see a group, an Asian family group, and I don't have that context. So that title might work for the author, but externally, we've got no context, and the context isn't in the image to tell me that. So just be careful of how you title things. Eagle Hunter. Another environmental portrait of this distant culture. It's giving me great context for his life as well. I'm seeing all these fantastic colors. The background works really well with the colors in his dress and the furs. It's a tight composition, but it's absolutely jam-packed with information, with the hooded eagle there on his right. The Image feels a little bit soft. The print is a little bit soft. It's not. The focal point seems to be slightly behind his eyes, and kind of on the zip on his hoodie, his jacket there, which is a minor distraction, but and there's some fairly dark areas blocked in on his right, or just below his right shoulder there, which are coming out. There's a little more detail in the digital. But it's great composition, lovely catchlight in his eyes, very engaging portrait. Score 4, high acceptances. I'm watching you. That stark sharpness in the eye and that almost, it feels emotionless eye staring back at me is captivating. And I wonder about what that person is thinking. Are they condemning or accusing me? Are they scared? I don't know, but it's intriguing. I like the checker pattern, and the framing made by that zip is really interesting. Though I do find the sharpness of the double exposure on the zip to be a bit of a pulls my eye slightly away from her eye. And on the print, the two diagonal triangles on an overlay stand out quite a lot more than they do on the digital, which pull my eye away. I'm not sure that they're adding as much, or they feel like they're causing more of a distraction away from her eye and that central part of the image. But I really like the framing, and I enjoyed this portrait a lot. Oh, crikey. Kotukutu tree. Ish. Something like that. Sorry about my pronunciation, Alan. The brightness of the central leaves, this is another print you really need to go and have a look at. And the slight drop off in focus and brightness around the perimeter of the frame makes this really enjoyable botanical study. The specimens jump out of the image, especially the metallic printing process and the translucent paper that's been used, all kind of add to that sense of the sort of fragile softness and tactile feel of the leaves. And just kind of, add to that story even more. There's detail absolutely everywhere through this image. Lovely supporting framing to the main story. There's one little, I mentioned it here, one little horizontal brighter line in the background as the only minor distraction, but on the digital, I think it might be this one here. Comes out a little stronger on the print, but it's so nicely framed to keep your eye circling through those main leaf clusters. Very well enjoyable, nicely crafted. Dreamy iris. Soft lighting and neutral tones work really nicely for this delicate floral still life. The two flowers and they're supported by those two fallen petals in lovely detail. It's super sharp and beautiful on the print. The vase fits the subject really nicely for me. That kind of the color tones all support it very well. I like the marble-like soft texture that's been applied across the whole image, and the border works really well. There's a little line on the base of the vase across on the bottom. It looks like it might be either a mask or the edge of the table, and it's on one side but not on the left. And I wonder if that could be removed to, you can just see it just down here. That would kind of create more of the sense of that sort of infinity background. But it is beautifully presented, very nice image. It's also slipped slightly in the matte, so I hope that can be tweaked before final night. Tree in snow. The detail in this tree is just fantastic. It's really engaging. The snow-laden branches and all the twigs coated as the snow keeps falling. It's really interesting kind of detail to get stuck into the middle of. I love the textured paper that's been used. That complements the scene and the feel really nicely. adds that extra little depth to the blanketed snow across the scene. I found some of the softer smudges of the still falling snow, I found they're so subtle on the print. I found them almost like a little bit of a distraction, especially in the upper corners. And I wonder if maybe toning those down a little might help. But compositionally, I really enjoyed it. The detail in the foreground, there's a few little blades of grass sticking through the blanket of snow, and the soft ripples in the snow on the foreground are lovely. And that weighted composition and the implied direction of the tree in the frame worked really nicely for me. Dahlia bloom. I'm fairly sure I got this one the wrong way around as well. I'm pretty sure I looked at this one portrait orientation. The central bloom with its rough cut stem and those two loose petals work really nicely. If Joseph Banks had an airbrush, I've written here. I love that simple composition. It does seem to be a bit of a theme in this competition of the high key white background. I don't know, is there some ulterior motive to this? There's quite a lot of these simple white background images. But I really enjoyed this one. The careful treatment on the flower, the way that it's been, the edges have been highlighted, make it a really interesting image to look at and enjoy. And I can't help thinking it would work beautifully as part of a series of similar images. Time for an exhibition. Into the woods. The fog's created lots of depth in this image. There's that main group of trees in the center of the foreground. Sorry, from the side here it looks quite compressed. I'm kind of, because I'm stood so obliquely to the screen. That main group of trees supported by two more groups, one on each side. Really enjoyable, and my eyes kind of end up going down these intertwined avenues and archways. I love that interaction between the trees. This is an open comp, so that fence line on the right could just disappear into the fog a little more and leave me to enjoy the trees in even more detail. But I love those twisted archways. I can't remember where I heard it. Someone talked about photographing in forests was all about looking for conversations. And I think this image exemplifies that really nicely. Well done. Beginnings. It's a bright, vibrant triptych of all these motion blurred scenes. It's all about the colors and the shapes and the directions of movement in this image. That warm golden yellow tone makes me think of summer and flowers and possibly the botanic garden or something. It's just, lovely warm tones and that feeling of being warm. I love the simple black background, and the format of the images works really well to keep me in the frame, let me explore without being too distracted. There's a little more weight on the print in the central vertical bar. I think it's slightly wider than the one at the base, and especially where the matting's been put in, that's made the outer black bands slightly smaller, and evening those up might help remove that as a distraction, create a little more balance, but a nicely crafted image. And now we're into honours. Headland Fort Bragg. This is just chocker with stories for me. There's two different parts, and my brain was kind of going with this kind of literal versus surreal or otherworldly feelings with this. The bottom section is quite literal. There's a stark rocky headland and what I perceived to be two characters, and my brain decided that it was father and young daughter standing out on this headland. It's a really dark, moody print, and I kind of, it gave me this sense of like, either foreboding or a desire to leave. I'm not sure which. This sort of perched on the edge of reality. There's stories about, real and fantasy, or I hate to say it again, but death and mortality and time and traveling beyond. Really, really enjoyable image. The gritty texture in the top half kind of adds to that as well, and makes it more of a sense of reality and otherworldly. Very enjoyable print, and probably plays to my own sense of depression and yeah. Feathered Sentinel. Lovely focus, really nice viewpoint, getting down below the subject. Make this proud beast dominate his surroundings. The background is really nice. It complements the subject. The tones work really well. It gives me a sense of place and location without competing for my attention. The head in the print, the head is quite tucked into the top corner against quite a dark background. A little bit more space around the head might be quite nice, or maybe just a little bit more dodging to bring the bird's head to the fore a little more. But it's a lovely print, really enjoyable. Lots of detail, and that you can sense his character in the image. It's great. Anhinga, Florida wetlands. I had to Google this one. I had no idea what an anhinga was. Apparently, in Brazilian, it roughly translates as devil bird, which is awesome. The print's superb. The image it does this subject so much justice. There's so much context in the location, all the leaves or whatever it is, weeds on that perch and in the background, slightly dropped out of focus, but enough information to give me context to where it is. It's almost too perfect, and I really wonder whether that perch is prepared for those birds to land on. But hey, I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's a gorgeous nature portrait, and it's beautiful print. Well done. And best in show, Pico fern, also called hen and chicken, or spleenwort. Spleenwort, less glamorous, but fantastic. My favorite ferns, the new ferns grow on the mature leaves, and they're just so cool. But I love that central arced composition and the way that it flows against that darker base of all the ladder ferns in the background. Makes that sort of that arc and the beauty of the ferns stand out even more. I like the symmetry in the image, and the sort of sense of that's exactly what it looks like in nature. I think it's fantastic. The printing is beautiful. There's the gold tones in the image are really, really nice. And if you look, you have to go and study this one because it's a tiny little print. It's beautiful. If you get up really close, the blacks and the gold actually kind of create this almost embossed effect, and all the little detail on the leaves stands out, adding even more of a sort of three-dimensional effect to the print. So that was my best in show. Thank you all for listening.
Ready? Could you bring up the acceptances? Lovely, thank you. So the first acceptance score of 3 Dance by Hee-Chen Kim. The next one is Masha by Ian Walls. Starry Night, Lake Alexandrina by Mike White. Kuching Market by Ian Harrison. Fisherman's Hut, Paulburn Dam by Diana Andrews. Looking Down by Heidi Anderson. Heidi's with us tonight. Shy Gannet by Dawn Kirk. Reflection of a Crocus-Filled Light Bulb by Jan Bogue. Fond Memories of the Annapurna Trek by Alistair Phillips. Eagle Hunter by J.K. So these are high acceptances. I'm Watching You by Heidi Anderson. Kotuku Tuku Tree Fuchsia by Stuart Klook. Dreamy Iris by Dawn Kirk. Tree in Snow by Mike White. Dahlia Bloom by Jan Bogue. Into the Woods by Hee-Chen Kim. Beginnings by Paul Williams. So the honours images, Headland Fort Bragg by Ian Walls. Feathered Sentinel by Alistair Phillips. And Hinga, Florida Wetlands by Ian Harrison. In the honours, Best in Show, Pico Pico Fern by Stuart Klook. So, thank you, James, for judging those for us and for your thoughtful critiques that you provided. I'm sure that those who entered images would have found your feedback very informative and interesting, so thank you. Here you are. Thank you.
Well, that's it. Thanks very much, everybody. I hope that was you enjoyed that as much as I did. That was a fantastic commentary. Thank you, James. It was really well done. Alan's just reminded me, and I meant to mention it before, that those who didn't see on Facebook, unfortunately, Charlene Evans, who was a member of CPS some time ago and has been lots of Laurie Thomas salons, lost her battle with cancer just recently, so that's a bit of a sad thing to have to add. But on a brighter note, thank you for coming, and a special thank you to everybody involved in tonight. So to James and Richard, thank you very much for your presentations. Gordon and Wayne up the back for the broadcast and for the sound. Alistair and Alan for projection, and John was doing the meet and greet. So thanks everybody. Can we just ask everybody put the lights back on to the prints and go and have a good look at them again? And if one of your prints is up there, don't be in too much of a rush to pick it up, because everybody want to come and have another look after the comments that James made. So take your opportunity to go and have a look, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you.